Welcome to Nasdaq Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq. Joining us is Tendayi Kapfidze. He's the Chief Economist at Nasdaq-listed Lending Tree. We're going to learn about the effectiveness of the Payment Protection Program as well as housing recovery on the other side of COVID-19. Tendayi, it's great to have you back with me. Congratulations on the birth of your baby girl, triplets. That's quite an accomplishment as we're going through COVID-19. It's great to hear everyone is safe and healthy. Let's get right into it. The effectiveness of the Payment Protection Program, how does that look?
So there's two things. There's how the actual rollout is going, which, has not been great. There's been some controversy of some really large companies getting significant amounts of money. And just today, they're going to be blocking some of the large banks from actually making applications to give smaller financial institutions a chance to get their customers in there. So it's been a challenge with implementation. And a lot of businesses who have tried to get loans have not gotten loans and have not been approved. In fact, we found in our survey that just around 5% of the businesses we surveyed said they actually got a loan. So it's been a bit of a challenge.
Let's talk about the businesses that have been most effective. What sectors are having the biggest challenges?
Yeah, so we asked the question, like, if businesses had laid off employees. We found on aggregate about 58% of businesses said they had laid off employees. But when we break down by industry, we see a really wide spread from 82% in accommodation and food services. So that's obviously travel and restaurants. And you can just go around your local neighborhood and see how those businesses have been impacted. And then some kind of interesting other things, 75% mining, quarrying, and oil and gas extraction. I think that's also related to the huge plunge we've seen in oil prices. Arts, entertainment, and recreation at 68%. Obviously, people cannot gather in large groups to partake of some of these entertainment functions, including things like sporting events. And I remember when the NBA ended their games, that's kind of, I think that really crystallized for a lot of people how serious this COVID-19 was. I spoke to somebody who said they think of COVID-19 in terms of before NBA and after NBA, when it really became, very clear that there was a significant problem with this virus.
So for those businesses that were able to receive the Payment Protection Program, how are they using the proceeds?
You're mandated to use 75% of the funds for payroll because the goal of the program is to maintain employment and maintain the ties of employees to their employers. A lot of economic research shows that if you break those employer-employee ties, it takes longer for the economy to recover because businesses have to staff up again, train, search for people, and that just adds inefficiency to the recovery. Outside of payroll, a lot of businesses are using it for rent and mortgage. We found 59% of businesses said they were using some of it for rent or mortgage. Utilities, 50% of businesses said they were using that for that. 29% said they were paying interest on pre-existing loans, which I found interesting. And then 18% were using it for benefits, which I guess is also a type of compensation for employees. A lot of employers have maintained healthcare benefits for employees that have been furloughed or even laid off to try and help people through this healthcare crisis.
All right. We also got pending home sales out this morning. If you're catching it on the replay, it's Wednesday, April 29th, down by nearly 21%. So I want to get your thoughts on housing and more on the other side of COVID-19. A year after the crisis, we have two charts here. The first one showing the lowest, and then the second one showing the highest in terms of recovery.
So, with housing, there's a couple of different shocks happening, right? There's a demand shock and also a supply shock in that a lot of people, if you have a house that you're trying to sell, perhaps you're not too eager to have people walking through your house, touching everything, given the concern around this health issue. And what we did also is because we were trying to find how can we look through this crisis and see what might come out on the other side for housing. In particular, we looked at housing prices And what we try to do, there are not a lot of good examples in the past, but we try to look at natural disasters and how they affected home prices in various cities around the country. And we saw some variation in how cities respond to natural disasters. For the most part, you actually see that prices still rise, about 2.5%, a year after the disaster. The challenge with our formulation, though, of course, is that natural disasters are usually localized. And so that localized area can still get support for their economy from the areas that are not affected by the natural disaster. But in this case, we have a crisis, healthcare crisis that's affecting the whole country. And it's also undetermined duration. A natural disaster usually has a very clear endpoint. The hurricane is past or the earthquake is over, and people can quickly get into recovery and rebuilding. And we're not in that state here. But we thought it was an interesting way to look at things. The conclusion from this is, probably we'll see some slowdown in home price appreciation. We might see some localized declines in some metro areas. But on the whole, we should see the housing market and home prices, say a year out from now, in fairly solid state if the rest of the economy recovers and comes back, um, you know, in a strong fashion.
All right, and to wrap up here, what are your thoughts on the overall economy? We know Q2 is certainly going to be tough. Some are calling it a throwaway quarter. I don't think that's necessarily the right term. I think there's a lot of lessons that are going to be learned from here. But realistically, do you think we'll ever get back to the old economy, or we're going to look at the lens of the consumer and our spending power very differently going forward?
Yeah, so there's two ways that I'll answer that. In terms of the value of the economy or the GDP output, we will get back, to up to the high point that we were. It probably will take some time. I don't think we'll get a V-shaped or even a U-shaped recovery. I think we'll get an initial bounce back when things open up, and then it's going to be a long slog to recover the lost output. In terms of consumer behavior, I think there will be permanent changes in the way people interact. Even just like work behavior. A lot of people have realized, well, I can actually just work from home. A lot of companies are realizing that they're pretty effective, even if everybody is distributed out. So there's going to be a lot of changes to the economy and the way people do things. And then just getting back to the small business discussion we were having earlier, there's unfortunately a lot of permanent destruction and permanent damage being done to many small businesses. A lot of places are just not going to come back. So we're going to have some permanent loss of businesses, permanent loss of jobs, permanent loss of incomes, and it's going to take some while to recover that lost output.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us, as always, Tendayi.
Awesome. Glad to be here.
All right. And thanks for joining me on Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.